Welcome to the latest transmission of Rice Against the Grain. Today, I had the honor and privilege of being joined by author, speaker, political activist, and defender of the Constitution of the United States, Sheriff Richard Mack. Before we get into it, make sure you visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX and Rice Against the Grain content. You will also find links to all of my various channels as well as my social media. Make sure you're following both of my YouTube channels, Rice TVX as well as Rice Against the Grain. And due to censorship, make sure you follow me on other alternative platforms such as Rumble and Odyssey, where I do post up exclusive content. If you want to support Rice TVX, be sure to check out and join my Patreon channel, where you will get early access to my videos with no ads, unedited. You will also get exclusive content and more. I will include links in the video description for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything shared on today's video. All right, joining me on today's show is a guest who I have been looking forward to bringing on the show for quite some time, and I've actually been procrastinating about it, but I made it happen. I got in contact with the man himself, and he agreed to do the interview. Today, I am joined by Sheriff Richard Mack. Sheriff Mack, welcome to the show. How you doing, my friend?
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate being on with you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, again, I know your time is valuable. Once I started getting in contact with you, I realized just how busy you are. You're traveling a lot. You're doing a lot of interviews. You're doing a lot of public speaking. Yeah. So we got a lot to share on today's video, and I'm going to be respectful of your time. And again, I do appreciate. So everything we talk about will be linked down below in the video description. But for anybody, and I don't usually ask this question of too many people, but as we were talking before we started recording, there's a lot of information out on the internet that doesn't really color you in a pretty picture. So in your words, from what you've experienced, who is Sheriff Richard Mack?
Well, I'm a guy who just wanted to be sheriff, and especially in my hometown. That was a dream come true. In 1988, I got elected as sheriff of Graham County. That's where I grew up, played sports. I was a very good athlete and had some big time offers all across the country. As a matter of fact, one of them was Joe Paterno from Penn State. I ended up busting up my leg pretty bad. I played 1 year college ball, baseball, and football. And then I got married and decided to settle down and get going. But I will tell you, I'm a very nice guy. I get along with everybody. And my mom raised us as very accepting in all people, whether they were the same religion or the same race. It didn't matter. Everybody was welcome in our home. We were not raised in any way to be prejudiced or racist against anyone else. My hero is Rosa Parks, and Willie Mays was my favorite baseball player of all time. I don't know if you know this, but those two people are black. And I always had it on my bucket list to meet Rosa Parks and shake her hand and give her a hug, but because she's exactly what we preach about. In fact, a video about her is in my presentation that I give nationwide to all sheriffs and citizens, and all of my public presentations have her in it. She's with me. And the biggest question about her is, sheriff or officer, if you were called back into time, would you have arrested Rosa Parks? Well, she was arrested for not giving her seat to a white man, and that's how stupid some of our peace officers have been in this nation, because they literally arrested her for not giving her seat to a white man. And but now we're much smarter and sophisticated. Well, we arrest parents and label parents for going to a school board meeting and airing their opinions. We arrest Amish farmers for not getting permission to not pasteurize their milk. And I've worked with the Amish all across the country, but what I am now after I served 8 years as sheriff, while I was sheriff, the only reason that you and I are talking right now is I became the first sheriff in American history to stand against the federal government, file a major landmark lawsuit against the Clinton administration, take it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And Sheriff Prince and I were the ones that did this case together, and a few other sheriffs helped also, thank goodness. And Sheriff Prince from Montana and I ended up at the Supreme Court in December of 1996, and Justice Scalia wrote the decision for the majority, who agreed with us sheriffs that the federal government was out of control, had committed the act of overreach, tried to commandeer the office of sheriff for federal bidding. And I maintain that the federal government, the president, Congress, has no authority to tell your sheriff to do anything. And the United States Supreme Court agreed with us, and it was the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of America. Remember, this is the only time in history that a sheriff has ever done this. So I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the victory. And I'm also proud that that I sued the Clintons and lived to tell about it. And so now I'm an activist, and I train sheriffs and peace officers all across the country that there is a peaceful and effective solution, and that liberty and civil rights are for all people of all races, of all creeds, of all colors. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter who your daddy was. This is for everyone. If you make exceptions for liberty, everyone will end up getting their turn. And so it's as vital for me and my family to be free as it is for you, for anyone else. And like I say, I don't care where you're from or what color you are.
That's beautiful. And I appreciate you sharing that. One thing that I was thinking was, you served 8 years as a sheriff in Graham County. That was Arizona, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you did this lawsuit. I mean, that lawsuit was now something like 26, 27 years ago.
Yeah.
Why are you?
So yeah, it'll be 26 years this June.
Why are you continuing? What fuels you to continue this fight that I consider it a fight? I feel like you're trying to stand up for Americans. You're trying to educate people. You're trying to educate your fellow sheriffs. You're trying to educate peace officers. Why do you still keep doing it after all these years?
Well, first of all, the federal government has never really obeyed this decision, so I'm trying to get that out there. Also, many sheriffs say, "Look, we don't get to pick and choose which laws we enforce," and I actually agree with that. We don't, but you have to look at what is the supreme law of the land, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So we have to decide then. We have to decide: are you going to enforce traffic laws before and above the Bill of Rights? Are you going to enforce any state statute above the Bill of Rights? If the Bill of Rights is indeed the supreme law of the land, then we have to recognize that. And quite frankly, the argument about which laws we choose to obey really was over. The argument was over when we took our oath of office and we swore an oath of allegiance to the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state wherein we worked. So this whole thing is also contingent upon many sheriffs say, well, I have to do what the Supreme Court tells me. I can't deviate from that. Well, actually, you're wrong about that one too. But let's say you're right, Sheriff. Let's say you're right. You have to do what the Supreme Court says. Have the sheriffs of this country ever read my Supreme Court victory? Have they read that ruling? If they would read that ruling, they would know that half of the laws and other that come down from the federal government are completely and entirely unconstitutional. And what do we do? The question that I pose in every one of my training seminars to these sheriffs and peace officers and to the public as well: what do we do when government asks us to do something that's unlawful, that's unconstitutional? We tell the poor citizen, we tell the poor Amish farmer, you're going to have to get a lawyer. And can you really take on the federal government with your one lawyer that you're paying $20,000 a month to? Do people really have the kind of money that it would take to wage this kind of battle? I did this, and luckily in my lawsuit, the NRA ended up paying for most of our lawsuit.
Okay.
And if they didn't provide the lawyers and provide the money, we would have never been able to do this. It was about a $500,000 case, and 3.5 years of our lives. Cost me my career. I lost my third election because of this case. And the first thing CBS News asked me when I won, they said, "Do you feel vindicated?" And I said, "Yeah, can I have my job back?" And so people thought that I was spending too much time on this. People didn't like it that I was getting interviews and on CNN and I was on the Phil Donahue show and whatnot. But most of that took very little time. And I admit that filing a lawsuit is almost a full-time job. But I kept a very strict log of my activity, where I was, who I talked to. And so I had 2 full-time jobs, and I did them both very well. And I had some things happen to me as sheriff that I never anticipated happening, like Earth First protesters coming into my county for 1.5 years. And we handled those situations very well. But I want everyone to know that this Supreme Court decision totally backs law enforcement, totally backs local autonomy, and totally reinforces the 10th Amendment and state sovereignty. And Scalia talked about something that I really loved, and sheriffs and the world, America, needs to know and understand this. Our Constitution established a system of dual sovereignty. And that means the federal government has some sovereignty and the states have sovereignty. And then trying to make sure that we're here protecting the freedom, civil rights, and sovereignty of the people is really what we're supposed to be doing. And so if I swear to uphold and defend and protect the rights of the people, and the federal government is violating those rights, do I have some sort of obligation to go along with them?
No, to me, it would be a conflict.
It is a conflict. And I don't mind telling the state or federal bureaucrats, if you come into my county and violate the rights of the people, I will take action against you.
Now, the case that you're talking about is Prince and yourself versus the U.S., correct?
Yes.
And from this Justia U.S. Supreme Court website, talks about the primary holding was the federal government violated the 10th Amendment when Congress required state and local officials to perform background checks on people buying guns. Now, state and local officials.
There's one thing they didn't add to that.
Okay.
This was aimed at sheriffs in every state except there's 3 states that don't have sheriffs. So they went to state of it. Every other state, it was aimed at the sheriffs. And they called us the CLEO, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer. Matt, well, they got that right. But they also threatened to arrest us if we failed to comply. And that's in there. I was looking at a year in jail, a $10,000 fine, or both.
If you didn't do background checks on people.
If I didn't do what the federal government told me.
Which you were saying was unconstitutional.
Yes.
And you took an oath to the Constitution.
We actually got an injunction against Janet Reno and the Justice Department from being able to come after me while we were in court.
You know, and you were talking about this and it not really being enforced or recognized or even like public knowledge, apparently, because a lot of people don't speak about this case.
Right.
It makes me think about different things throughout American history that to me are unconstitutional, like our taxation of labor. That wasn't supposed to take place.
The 16th Amendment was an abomination. The IRS is an abomination, totally un-American. The IRS and individual liberty cannot coexist. The IRS makes its living by going after people unconstitutionally.
Well, that's been happening for over 100 years. I mean, and you've got
yes,
a situation that took place 26, 27 years ago, and still the federal government is still playing their games.
Yeah, they are. And their game is going after people who are ignorant of the laws and the Constitution and making sure that law enforcement stays ignorant, and we have to be more involved in this, and we have to stand up to them.
And
now,
you have
again, this is
sorry,
a peaceful process, and I've made that clear. I've never advocated violence. I've never committed an act of violence, and that goes back to your question about some of the things that people say about me on the internet. Is they actually, Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, has defamed me loads.
Hey, I want to pull that website up.
And you know what they don't do? They do all these articles about me and talk about me and criticize me and call me a racist and white supremacist, but they've never once reached out to me. Not once. The Southern Poverty Law Center at least reaches out to me, and then they lie about me. But I actually filed a lawsuit against them one time, and they had to print a retraction. And the whole thing was about me claiming violence, espousing and supporting violence against federal agents.
Right, like
that's a lie. I've never done that. I've never done
sort
that.
Of extremist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I wanted to bring this up, because if people were to just like go on Google per se, which I don't always recommend people to use Google as a search engine. I'm a big fan of pre-search, but anyways, they control what comes up, and you're going to see information like this. There's an article that you said wasn't so bad compared to others, but a USA Today article talking about, does your sheriff think he's more powerful than the president? And then,
and just like I said a little while ago, I mean, the sheriff has an obligation to protect the people in his county. If the president becomes the enemy of individual liberty, then we will include him in the list. But the thing of it is, it's apples and oranges. The sheriff is the top executive of the county. He is the #1 law enforcement officer in the county, not the president of the United States. Okay. And if you read the Constitution, the president has defined and discrete enumerated powers, as does Congress. And if they go outside that, then they're usually trampling on the sovereignty of the state or the county. And so the one thing we don't understand in this country, and every president, doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, they don't understand their constitutional authority or jurisdiction. And just because we do doesn't mean that we're saying we're smarter than them. They just try to play politics. The president cannot initiate gun control. United States Congress cannot initiate gun control. Now Kamala Harris is telling everyone, and so is the Biden and others and the Congress, that we need to do something about our nation's police officers who are outside the law and they use excessive force or kill innocent people. That is none of Congress's business. It's not. I'm sorry. There is nothing in the United States Constitution or anywhere else that gives any kind of authority or jurisdiction to the president or Congress to control the police officers in Arizona or Michigan or any other state. It's the states are in charge of their own law enforcement, not the federal government.
They're in charge of the federal law officers, like your U.S. Marshals
FBI,
and things like
DEA, that. They can't even control those guys.
Okay. Now, I mean, it's kind of frustrating when you think about some of the things that we're up against. So, I mean, part of what you're doing with the organization that you formed, and I made sure I got my notes here taken really well, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, the CSPCA. Part of what you're doing with that is you're trying to educate sheriffs. And can you define a peace officer? What is a peace officer?
Well, a peace officer, actually, most states' bureaucracies that oversee certification for cops are called, like Utah, it's UT Post, Utah Peace Officer Standards and Training. It's in Arizona, it's AZ Post. Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training. I think California is saying California Post, CA Post. Most of them call us peace officers. Then why do we call ourselves police officers? Police actually just enforce.
Yeah, like policy enforcer is what I think about.
Yeah, exactly. Policy is key to that. A true peace officer is assigned to patrol, to walk around schools, to keep the peace. When he goes to a family fight, his job is not to make an arrest. His job is to keep the peace. If he needs to make an arrest, he can and he will. But I like the whole mantra and the mission statement that we're here to keep the peace. And then CSPOA takes that to another level up, and that is that we're here to protect rights. And there's no better way to keep the peace than for every cop in this country, whether he's a patrol officer, a detective, sheriff, or chief of police, to understand our role in the protection of the American Republic, our constitutional republic. And we each swore an oath in God's name that we will uphold and defend the Constitution. How many of us have ever read the Constitution, and how many of us know and understand that? And is it at all possible for us to protect the rights of the people when we don't even know what their rights are? And so that's where we come in. We teach the Constitution. We teach specifically the Bill of Rights. We teach about the constitutional republic that we're a part of, that we are the guardians of the republic, that we're guardians of liberty. And then we teach quite extensively my Supreme Court decision, how it reinforces every bit of that.
Okay. Now, you mentioned taking an oath to the Constitution. Obviously, I mean, I know sheriffs do that. Do all technical, what we consider to be law enforcement, what you mentioned, like police officers, detectives, do all of those entities also take an oath to the Constitution?
Every one of them. And in fact, I've always said this in my presentation this evening, way up here, from the dog catcher down to the president, we each swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution.
It's just strange to think, because I mean, if you wrote a book, the sheriff's county is the America's last, the county sheriff, America's last defense, last hope.
Yeah.
And then I think about what police officers are doing. They seem to be more of policy enforcers versus being peace officers. And I'm wondering where that disconnect came, because like, it doesn't seem like, I've heard so many times that police are not here to protect the public and people.
Now, well, yeah, that's an amazing thing for any cop to say, that, oh, good, I don't have to protect anybody.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, the problem is the mistaken training that happens at our police academies in this country. We don't train in the oath of office. We don't train in the Constitution. They train in case law. And courts do not make law. Okay, that's another. We have a lot of mistakes that we've gotten used to. And Thomas Paine said that a long habit of not thinking a thing to be wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being correct or right. Well, we've done that with law enforcement. We think it's our job to go in and kick doors in and get all the drugs off the streets, which we've never been able to do, but we'll spend more time and manpower on it and money on it next year, and we'll really go after them. You know, all the futility of what we do, all the traffic tickets. This is a $6 billion industry that brings in more money to governments because we just need more money. And it has very little to do with public safety. I love the presence of cops being on the streets, but I do not agree with all the wholesale distribution of traffic tickets. And I'll tell you why. The 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution says, and then the 5th and 6th talk about due process, but there's not due process with this. You can get a ticket in Florida on vacation and then fly home or drive back home to Nebraska, and then you want to contest that ticket. You have to spend another $1,000 just to get back to Florida to go to court on that ticket.
Yeah, to appear in person.
But yet, if you don't pay the ticket, Florida will contact your state and have your license suspended. But you don't get any hearing whatsoever about that ticket in Nebraska, where you're from. None. but they'll be happy to help them suspend your license for you, for Florida. See, none of that makes any sense. It puts government ahead of the person. The people deserve the benefit of the doubt here, not the government of Florida or Alabama or Timbuktu, California. It doesn't matter. And so the whole system is stacked against us. As soon as you go into court, the judge does not look at you as being innocent until proven guilty. Traffic tickets are his word against mine. They don't have to show any evidence whatsoever what the radar gun showed at the time. They don't have to show anything. They just, the officers, the gun said 55 and it was a 35 zone. So I wrote him a ticket. And then you put the officer on, you ask him all these questions. And then you say at the end, Your Honor, there's really insufficient evidence here. I testified that I wasn't going 55. He testified that I am. He has no physical evidence whatsoever that I was going 55. He has no recording, no visual, nothing from his radar gun. All he says is that, according to him, the radar gun was properly certified and working fine. And then the Eighth Amendment says, no excessive fines or bail, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. What do you think, officer? What do you think about excessive fines or bail? Well, that's exactly what tickets are. They're excessive in their amount. Like in California, it's $500 to $750 for a simple moving violation. And that's excessive. How about their frequency? Millions and millions of tickets are written every week across this country to poor unsuspecting people. And what if I'm going down the street and there's nobody around and I go 65 in my nice little Dodge Charger that my wife lets me drive every now and again in a 35 zone, and yet no one was threatened. The peace and safety of no other individual was ever in question. Yet they write me a ticket, and probably being that far over, I'll get it for reckless driving, which brings with it a suspension of license. And then, even to top all this off, who am I writing the tickets for? Chris, have you ever known who I'm writing tickets for? Who do cops write tickets for? Okay.
I thought they were writing tickets for the city or the county or whatever the situation might be.
But who's the biggest benefactor? Insurance companies. And so, first of all, the law requires everyone to have insurance. And then if you get a couple of tickets or you get a reckless driving, you can get it suspended, and your license and your insurance premiums are going to go skyrocketing, and you don't get a hearing on that either.
No.
And so this is just another fine that comes with it, with the insurance company, that the state is requiring you to have in the first place. So you get the states and the insurance companies working together to bring in that money. And quite honestly, it was the insurance companies who got most of the seatbelt laws passed in every state. So there's less damage to the person, and so they have to pay out less, and they get them because you get to write tickets for it now, and completely for insurance companies.
Yes, it's very, very corrupt, my friend. And I like to think, I mean, you come from a different background as me, but I like to think that if there's no victim, there's no harm being done, there's no crime.
I totally believe that.
And to me, that's just natural law, common law. We're not hurting someone. There's no one else. And there's, like you said, if I chose to drive an excessive speed limit compared to what you think I should drive when there is absolutely zero individuals around, why do I need to obey that specific law if it's there to prevent harm? And I can't harm anybody. So yeah, it does make sense.
When I was a rookie cop, it was actually traffic ticket writing that made me change my mind about law enforcement and government. And I felt so guilty writing this ticket to a lady one day. I didn't give it to her. And I went back and I said, why are we doing this? And I determined that I was going to find out what government is for. Why do we have police officers, and why do we have to treat people like this? And I ran Well, I started my research and I ran smack in the face to the oath of office. And I promised myself that I would never be on the wrong side again, that I would keep my oath. I would know the Constitution, and I do. I could quote you so much from the Constitution, but anyway, the Bill of Rights, especially, is the supreme law of the land. And if we're violating that, we are the bigger criminal than the ones we're going after.
Which makes sense. It really does. When we were talking privately the other day, you had mentioned I'm not sure what you call it, the follow, obey, enforce it, live it regarding the Constitution. Do you mind expanding on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, it again, how do we as cops understand our role in preserving our God-given American Republic if we don't know what the rights of the people are? Do we understand that people have a guaranteed right to keep and bear arms, and then yet the federal government or state government comes and tells us, make sure you get rid of that bump stock, make sure you get rid of this kind of gun and these kind of magazines, and get rid of this kind of ammunition, and arrest law-abiding citizens who are simply exercising their right that is already guaranteed in most states and guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. We're now seeing the fruits of the CSPOA labor when we now have almost 90 sheriffs in Illinois standing against their own governor and their own legislature, standing against their own government, because now they want to get rid of obviously get rid of these horrible guns that are assault rifles, and they want to make it a crime to possess one. And this kind of idiocy is what really makes us wonder, how is it that Illinois has the most strict gun control laws now, and yet Chicago for the past 5 years has been 1 or 2 in the top murder rate by guns? And so they say, oh, well, let's see, Einstein said doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is lunacy. And so now they want to double down and do even more of what they've been doing and think they're going to get a different result. And this is the type of leadership we have in a lot of the major cities in America: LA, San Francisco, Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta. It's ridiculous. Washington, D.C., most gun control ever, and they have the highest gun death rates of any city. And all the top death cities, all of them have the strictest gun control.
When you mentioned that, though, I was thinking about Illinois passing this law where they're supposed to be getting rid of the cash bails. Some people are referring to it as a purge law, allowing for stuff to kind of go on before police or anybody can react. I think giving like 48 hours and then not being able to hold people. And
yeah,
have you looked into this at all?
California's been doing that. New York has been doing that. And it's not working. To let murderers and rapists and pedophiles right back out on the street. Polly Klaas, when I was sheriff, Klaas, Polly Klaas from Petaluma, California, was murdered. She was at a slumber party, and somehow this guy took off with her. And I can't remember his name. It seems like Richard Harris, but I might be wrong, so I don't want to say that name.
Okay.
But anyway, this was a long time ago, but I got really involved in the case and really helped. And I said, look at what we're doing. So he didn't even serve half his sentence, not even half, quite a bit less than half his sentence. He's released and he goes and does it again. But this time he got rid of the evidence, a little girl. And her father went out on the lecture circuit. I talked to him a couple of times and told him how we wanted to help and back him. But these heinous crimes, look at how many people who have been in Congress or local officials that have been caught and charged with sexual assaults, and hardly any of them ever get in any trouble. And look at Bill Clinton. He went with Epstein 26 times to the sex ranch in New Mexico and never even gets investigated.
Well, the island too, man. I don't know, New Mexico too, but that island, the flight records show a lot of visitations. Not only him, but a lot of other individuals.
Oh,
now
yeah.
we're treading in some territory that the YouTube overlords might deem as something that they're going to give me a strike for. So I want to try to be careful with this area.
Well,
but
have them look into it then. I don't care who looks into it, but quite honestly, a lot of politicians
I know.
have gotten away with this.
We have a very corrupt
system.
Some
of them have investigations, and usually it's like a 12-year sentence, sexual assault on a child, and several politicians throughout the last 10, 15, 20 years have only got probation or at the most a year in jail. And it's not fair. There's a 2-tier justice system in America. And these same crooks in Washington, D.C. are also allowed to do insider trading. The same thing that Martha Stewart went to prison for.
No, I know. I'm very aware. I'm very aware of the corruption, man. But when you said to me that your typical police officer, when they're going through training, are not trained in the Constitution, but they're trained in statutory law, it makes sense. Right. I can't even necessarily blame the officers, but when they are educated by somebody like yourself, who kind of brings it to their attention, then they can't really ignore it. And then you got to question the individuals.
All those agencies, CNN came out to my home about 4 months ago and interviewed me out here. And I told them, I said, I know you're going to lie about me. And she goes, oh, no, I'm not. Why would you say that about me? I said, you work for CNN, And so she did. She lied about me. And they don't want to tell the truth. They don't want to say ever that I won a case at the United States Supreme Court, because that gives me too much credibility. So none of them say that. Washington Post doesn't say it. Lied about me in 5 articles. CNN lied about me and never said that. Oh, he trains officers. Oh, no, he does. He does training for sheriffs and officers. Well, yeah, I'm the only sheriff in American history to sue the federal government and win. I launched the lawsuit. Yeah, other sheriffs joined me in the lawsuit, and I was so grateful for him. I'm very good friends with Sheriff Prince, and I was so grateful that he joined. I didn't want to be the only one doing it, but I started the whole thing, and we did win. And so I asked the reporter, Sarah Sidner from CNN, sitting in my daughter's house while she was interviewing me, this close as I am to you right now.
Right.
And I said, should the sheriffs and police of this nation, should they enforce my Supreme Court decision? She never would answer.
Well,
they don't want to tell the truth. They don't want to know the truth, and they don't want to be exposed as lying.
But we're going to be sharing the truth here, and these links will be provided down below, and then people can look up just this case information and do some searching, and you'll be able to find more information regarding exactly what you said. I want
people to do, if you want it easy, I wish I had one right here handy. I don't, but I have a little pocket-sized booklet of a review of my Supreme Court case on my website, and it's white with all the state flags. It looks real big because it's bold. The picture makes it look big.
Where's it at?
It goes to
on this website?
Shop? Yeah. Is it shop or
let's see.
Books or help or
certification court CP store? Let's see about the store. I'll just pull this up while we're talking.
Okay, there's scroll down. There's the County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. Keep going.
This is it.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, on this particular page.
One book there.
So, I think if you click on, I don't know, because it does say 13. Maybe if you click on the books, it gives more. Wait, yeah.
It's supposed to, yeah, keep going.
Keep going. Okay.
There it is. There it is. Right. No, go back up. No. Yeah, right there on the left.
This
Supreme Court case for state sovereignty. That's it.
Okay. So this will give a complete breakdown
of like $3. I don't make anything off of this,
Okay.
Buy the other books. If you want me to make a little, buy all the other books. They're fantastic. But the most important book you could get from me is the Supreme Court case. You read that. It's only 16 pages, takes you about 10 minutes to read, and then go through it and highlight all the major points. because Scalia actually quotes the founding fathers. He quotes the Federalist Papers. He quotes the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. He takes us through a history lesson. He doesn't try to make law or make stuff up. He took us through history. And he said this, hence a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other. Now, CNN and Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL, they don't want anything to do with that because it's the truth. And these people run from the truth. And another thing you mentioned briefly, my Wikipedia page. Do you know who puts most of the stuff on my Wikipedia page? My enemy.
I was going to say, I don't think it's you.
It's not me.
Is your middle name Ivan?
And they lie all the time about me. And I could get somebody to monitor it for me and then take out all the lies. They come back the next day. But because
this is with your lawsuit, it says that you were recruited by the NRA. And something I was going to tell you is
that's a lie.
Somewhere around this time, I worked for the NRA briefly. I lived in, I'm from Northern Virginia. I'm from Manassas, and I worked in Fairfax and Chantilly at the NRA for like 2 years. Okay. I went from the customer service to the ILA, the Institute for Legislative Action.
I know them too. Yeah. They helped. ILA helped the most. Look, I'm not degrading the NRA, but historically speaking, I recruited the NRA. They didn't, and
that makes sense. That makes sense. But I mean, again, like this is what some of what we were talking about before we were recording was this misinformation about you. Right. I was telling you, like, I've interviewed Ammon Bundy. You know, he was involved with the Bundy standoff with his father, Cliven, and they use a lot of the same words, extremist, militant, things to that effect. Why do you think that they're trying to paint you in a negative light, especially like, acting like you're more powerful than the president? Why do you think that this is taking place?
They want to marginalize or completely stop the training that we're providing and the truth that we're providing to our nation. And they know that we're being successful and they're trying to stop it.
And so you don't agree with the ADL calling this how extremists are successfully infiltrating the law enforcement, calling you an extremist doing this?
I've been called an extremist and a radical before. I would tell you that the founding fathers were all extremists and radicals, according to the political correctness of the day. And according to the political correctness today, I guess I am, because I extremely believe in liberty. And Barry Goldwater said, when he was called an extremist, he said, extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. And I agree with that. And folks, just understand this. I've never committed an act of violence the 20 years I was in law enforcement. I never shot anybody. I never beat anybody up. I never even took my fist and slugged another human being, ever. I never maced anybody. I never threw anybody down. The biggest thing is, I guess I did. Like I said, I used to play football. I tackled two guys who were fighting downtown on Center Street. I tackled them both at the same time.
Sweet.
We all got up and I told them, you guys can go to jail or you can go home. They went home. There was a shoplifter one night and it was a foggy night and he ran right in front of me and I tackled him. That's the extent of my violence in 20 years of law enforcement.
I respect that.
I didn't beat him up after that. I just picked him up. In fact, I picked the guy I tackled. I picked him up, put him in handcuffs, and took him to jail. I didn't beat him up. I've never had to beat up anybody. And yet I was always leading in arrests, drunk driving arrests especially. And I'm sorry, there's some people who say we don't have the right to make DUI arrests. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I believe in DUI enforcement. But even then, I want to be fair and honest. And DUI checkpoints are unconstitutional. They're illegal. How is it that the Supreme Court allows us to stop everyone without probable cause?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things that are taking place that just seem like they're not supposed to take place. So that's why I appreciate people like you. Now, to be respectful of your time, I mean, one area of research that I've been looking into for a few years now is what I call the legal fiction, where some people talk about an artificial legal entity being created at our birth. You have some groups in the United States, some teachers like Anna von Reitz, David Straits, Russell J. Gould, to name just a few, who are out here teaching people about various ways of changing your status.
Right.
They seem to be coming at this from a very parallel point of view from what you're trying to talk about. The federal government seems to have overstepped its boundaries. The legal fiction space looks at it as the federal government has become a corporation, and our legal entities are created as a way for us to interact in this commerce system. What are your thoughts on this whole status correction? Some people call it, and I don't like using these words, but these will be words that you're probably more familiar with, the sovereign citizen, which is an oxymoron in and of itself, and then free man on the land. But just that whole, what are your thoughts on that movement? I'm not necessarily asking you to talk negatively about any individuals, just what your overall thoughts are.
I would say most of it does parallel some of the things we say. Well, most of it, I said most of it, some. I don't know really if it's most of it. Their intent, I believe, like Anna von Reitz, I believe that she's a well-intentioned person. I don't know those others. I think I talked to David Straight once, but there might be some truth to some of the things they do or say. But I do know for a fact that several people that have followed them have gone to prison. And I do know for a fact that the people that believe in sovereign individuality, that they answer to no higher authority. First, I've got to question whether or not they're married, because I guarantee I answer to a higher authority. She just walked in here a minute ago.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, we all agreed that we would live in a constitutional republic. Yes, where we self-govern. But when we go outside that, then we have problems. I'm still 50-50 on the driver's license, for instance. The sovereign individuals don't believe they have to have their vehicles registered, which I have a problem with.
The right to travel versus driving.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And do I need a permit to get married? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. I have to go get a permit from government to marry my wife, which is a religious ceremony, and I need permission from the government, and I have to pay him $75 to get that permission?
Right.
No. And do you know where the marriage license came from? It was a Jim Crow law. It was racist.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was the local government determining that blacks could not interracially marry whites.
Because
and that's where the license came from.
A Bible used to be accepted as a way of showing that you were married, showing births and all that stuff, your family Bible, which is really interesting to think about that. So one of the things, though, that these individuals in this movement talks about now is the fact that your U.S. citizenship, the 14th Amendment, has put you under the jurisdictional control of the federal government, and you need to shed your U.S. citizenship and go back to an American national, American citizen, state citizen. Since you're like, I would like to consider you one of the experts and very knowledgeable in the Constitution.
Oh, howdy. I wish I had my pocket Constitution with me. I left it in on the kitchen table. I was just reading it. But the 14th Amendment actually says that no state shall pass any law that the American citizens are immune from. And they can't enforce. That reinforces what the sheriff, it says, cannot enforce any law or statute that infringes on the immunities and rights of the citizens. We need to look at that 14th Amendment. That first part of it is fantastic. That it makes all of us subjects. I'm not so certain that it does that. And I don't agree with that. But the 14th Amendment, I think, has taken a lot of hits unnecessarily. And if we read the good parts in that 14th Amendment, it'll reinforce what we're trying to do at the CSPOA. And look, Chris, overall, what are we really after here? We're after individual liberty, and that to be protected at all levels. As far as the horrible abuses and corruption of government, I tell everybody, if we started listing everything that we need to get rid of that is a government abuse, where would we put having a driver's license on that list? That would probably be down to 25, 30, 35, maybe down to 50.
You got a lot bigger problems to
we
worry
have
about.
So much bigger problems. And right now we're trying to create these defenses and, like Madison said, erect the barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. That's what we're trying to do. We're doing it peacefully. I don't support anybody using violence. If it's sovereign citizens, if they're using violence, I hope they go to prison. I hope they go to jail. This is a peaceful process. This is not a call to arms. This is a call to action and to stand bold and to stand firm and to get your sheriff to do the same with you and to get the sheriff to understand his duty to interpose on your behalf and to protect you from being victimized by any government official. That's what this is about.
I love that, man. And that kind of leads into one of my last questions. A friend of mine, Eric Sullivan, who learned a lot from you. I told him I was going to be doing this interview, and he had a question for me to ask, which was, ask about defending constituents against federal agencies in order to defend their constitutional rights. And then a follow-up was, ask about Chris Ann Hall and if there's any affiliation with her opinions, and her new movie.
Yeah, we've worked very closely with Chris Ann over the years. She's been one of our primary and sometimes even the keynote speaker at our conferences and training seminars. She really knows her stuff. Yeah, so I consider her a friend. I also consider her a comrade in arms. I guess I shouldn't say arms. I consider her a comrade in this battle. She's been there a long time. I think I've actually been doing this a little bit longer when you consider when I first filed my lawsuit in 1994. But be that as it may, she knows the authority and power of sheriffs. She's preaching that now too. She's a very good teacher about the Constitution, and I love it that she's now teaching some state constitutions as well. I was at one of her seminars where she did this to sheriffs in Texas and say, your state constitution is just as good or more powerful than the federal constitution. So yeah, we need to know both. We swear an oath to both constitutions as a state sheriff or a state employee, county employee. So yeah, that's extremely powerful. And then the other first part of that was
ask about defending constituents against federal agencies.
That's our whole emphasis, is to teach a sheriff to recognize when a federal agent is victimizing one of the citizens in his county, and that he should absolutely take action.
Now, when I think about that, and this is the last real question I have before I ask if you have any final thoughts, is I think about the Waco situation. I'm 48.
I use that all the time.
I'll be 48 here in a few months.
I talk about that all the time. 89 people were killed at Waco.
It's like, how did the federal government come in? And from what I see and understand, without having being there, is that the federal government superseded their powers and went against the local law enforcement, which would have been the
sheriffs there backed away. That's the problem.
So the sheriff should have stood the ground.
The sheriffs in Ruby Ridge, Idaho, at Ruby Ridge, and Randy Weaver got shot in the back, and his wife was murdered, and his son was killed. All of that. If the sheriff had remained in charge, and I've said this in my books, I've said it in my seminars, if the sheriff at Ruby Ridge had remained in charge, and if the sheriff in Waco had remained in charge, the law still would have been enforced, and nobody would have been killed, and especially federal agents at both places. One federal agent, Agent Deegan, was killed in Idaho at Ruby Ridge, and then 4 BHF agents were killed at Waco. None of this would have happened if the sheriff had remained in charge. In fact, the sheriff even told them, I can go arrest David Koresh anytime you want. And so men, women, and children were all killed. because the federal government overplayed their hand, and it was stupid. And again, if they would have coordinated with the sheriff and worked it out with him, the law would have been enforced. No one would have been killed.
I like the way you explain that. That makes sense. Because that's always kind of puzzled me. You know, I'm obviously not a huge fan of a lot of our law enforcement officers. I mean, I'm not going to say that all police officers and sheriffs are bad, but there's enough that it kind of has a stigma.
Yeah, they do.
If you saw my driving record, you'd understand. I mean, you probably don't understand why I say that, though, because I don't have a driver's license. I've got caught driving without a license, a suspended license too many times, so many times that a judge will just say you don't have any respect for the law.
Yeah.
And I can't really defend that because I've gotten in so much trouble about it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and to avoid that trouble, I would advise you, keep a license. Don't go to jail on that hill. Don't die on that hill. We need you out here for everything else.
well, I've stopped driving until I can get my situation straight. So,
good for you.
I had to sell my car several years ago just to kind of force myself. But it is what it is. And I appreciate.
How do you get around?
Ubers, walking, and public transportation.
Oh, okay.
And friends and family help as well.
Well, God bless you.
Well, thank you, my friend, and God bless you. The last thing I want to ask you is, for anybody who is not law enforcement, sheriff, any of that capacity, what words of advice would you give to non-law enforcement individuals to get involved with this bigger picture battle that we're involved in?
You want to have a relationship with your sheriff. You want to help your sheriff get our training. You want to help your sheriff form a posse. You want to help your sheriff understand that this is a simple process and how he should put federal and state agents on notice, bureaucrats on notice, that when they come into his county, they should check with him every time.
Okay.
That's the beginning of all of this. Cooperation and communication between those who want to come in from the state or federal government. And we can create a check and balance system there that will protect the people ultimately on both sides.
What if your local sheriff doesn't have testicles?
Well, it's hard to teach that part. But after they see the other sheriffs have done this, including myself, not the lawsuit, but I've actually stood up to the EPA and Army Corps of Engineers, and there's many other sheriffs that have done it. It's always ended up peaceful, and the people have been the benefactor of all of it. So we've got a lot of work to do, but get a relationship with your sheriff, be tactful, be kind, be friendly, and tell them we want to get going. So have your groups, your whatever group you belong to, get with other groups, your Tea Party groups, your gun rights groups, your tax protest groups. I don't care. Keep this peaceful, get a relationship with your sheriff, and encourage your sheriff to do certain things to keep your county more peaceful and protected.
And I would like to add too, if you guys are inspired by this, you're interested in becoming a sheriff or interested in becoming a police officer, I mean, listen to what Sheriff Mack has to say. Do you have any advice for people that are considering getting involved in law enforcement or becoming sheriffs?
Yes. Read the Constitution and know it backwards and forwards, especially the Bill of Rights. Memorize the first 10 of the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights. Memorize them and carry those forward with you. And then read my Supreme Court decision that I have, the highlighted version on my website. Read The Proper Role of Law Enforcement. That's another book that I have on my website. It's very small. It's inexpensive. The Proper Role of Law Enforcement. So read that one. Let's see, where it is. Nope, keep going.
No, I'm looking for it.
There it is.
The very bottom one. But there's
Look
also
at that picture of this young. Look at that young.
That was how long ago was that? That was
35 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you listening to some Limp Bizkit back then? But I will have a link down below too for the Amazon books as well. But people can buy directly from your website. If people want to contribute, there's ways that you can support.
You can become a member of our posse, our CSPOA posse. Become a member, donate monthly, and just do that. It's $11 a month to become a part of our posse and get involved in this process, folks. This is the only peaceful and effective solution we have left.
And I agree, man, because it's starting to get to where I don't think peaceful solutions are going to be on the table too much longer. But that's another discussion for another day.
I'm afraid you're right, but I pray you're not.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think it's another discussion, and hopefully we can, I would
Let's do
like
it.
to be able to have a future conversation with you. But do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to add that we didn't talk about? Any final thoughts you want to leave people with before we
I'll
do?
close it with Justice Scalia in my decision. And this is directly from the Mack Prince Supreme Court case, from the only time sheriff sued the federal government. He said this: but the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. So, folks, we can really use this case to take it to just about any concern we have, and take it to your sheriff and become partners with him in this holy cause of liberty.
Well, thank you again, Sheriff Mack. If you could just bear with me 1 second, just going to do the wrap up. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I will have links down below for everything that we shared on today's video. I do appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you smash that like button and be sure to share this video with others. I think this is a very important interview, and I think this needs to be heard by as many people as possible. Make sure you subscribe here at Rice Against the Grain and my other channel, Rice TVX. I may be posting this on both channels. Not quite sure yet. Going to figure that out. But make sure you are subscribed. And before we wrap things up, I will leave you with this. I encourage you, as always, to be a blessing to others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be the glitch you want to see in the matrix, and be the change that you want to see in this world. And until next time, practice change.